Kabuki is a traditional Japanese form of theater with roots tracing back to the Edo period, which lasted from 1603 to 1868. It is known as one of Japan's three major classical theaters, alongside No, which is their ceremonial theater, and Bunraku, which is their traditional puppet theater in Japan. Kabuki is rife with aesthetic appeal and showmanship. Not only are there elaborate costumes, trapdoors and rotating stages, makeup intended to portray intense emotion, and towering wigs, but there are also highly exaggerated movements, a convention which I would like to elaborate upon today. According to Professor Leonard C. Pronko of Pomona College, the word kabuki is intended to capture the essence of the merchant class, which in Japan even today is the middle class. When you look at the etymology of the word kabuki, it is actually three components combined into one. Ka means song, bu means dance, and ki means technique or performance. So, singing, dancing, and acting. And for my investigation, I focused on bu and ki, which are both important in observing the physical techniques involved in kabuki theater. The highly stylized movements involved in kabuki may be visually stunning as well as effective in expressing or evoking strong emotions in both the actor and the audience, but the movements also serve an additional and perhaps more significant purpose. These movements are essential to keeping the audience entertained because in kabuki theater they typically use an old-fashioned form of the Japanese language. And this means that non-Japanese spectators, and to be honest, the majority of Japanese spectators as well, have absolutely no idea of what is being said. Thus, the exaggerated and intricate movements are needed to both progress the plot and fill in the audience from time to time on the message that's actually being conveyed. Now, to provide some background information and some context on kabuki theater. The physical technique involved in kabuki theater requires both masterful coordination and practice. In fact, many kabuki performers begin their training at age 5 so that they can make their debut at ages 6 or 7. If the young performer is successful, then he, notice I say he, because in kabuki theater it is a male-dominated form of art, although ironically it was founded by a woman in the 1600s. But if he is successful, then he will continue this career into adulthood, rehearsing from 10 to 15 hours a day until his acting career achieves its zenith at the age of 45 or 50. See, it's almost as if the children are bred to become kabuki artists, as many kabuki artists were born into kabuki families who have carried that tradition for generations, and they are actually conditioned for such elaborate movement. Unlike many Western performances, which are often intellectualized and intended to immerse the audience into the reality of the story being told, kabuki actors are supposed to be fully aware that they are performing, and the audience really isn't supposed to get lost in the moment. In fact, the audience is supposed to be left breathless by the level of exaggeration and showiness conveyed. It's supposed to be an explicit message that this is not the reality, because people attend these performances to see how the actors perform, not actually the message of the play, which is a lot different than what we're used to hearing, especially in the Western society. Everything in kabuki is intended to be larger than life, and they call this a sort of formalized beauty. And so now for the fun part, some background information and a demonstration of what this type of Eastern formalized beauty looks like. One of the more popular physical techniques comes from a style of kabuki called arigato, which translates as rough business and refers to the battles between male superheroes and villains in kabuki theater. This famous technique in arigato is called mi okiru, or to cut a mi. For this movement, announced by the sound of wooden clappers, the actor freezes in a statuesque pose and crosses one or both eyes. Often, the actor rolls his head back and forth before freezing into the position. Now, I would like everyone to stand up for the demonstration. What I'm going to do, I'm actually going to make a sound of a wooden clapper clapping for 3 times, and that is going to be your cue to freeze into a warrior position. But here's the caveat to this. You need to maximize the movement of your limbs before you freeze into the position. Make sure that you utilize as many body parts as you possibly can to convey the message as well as possible. These types of movements should be so intricate that words don't need to be used to explain what has actually happened. So at the sound of 3 clappers, warrior position, all right? Unfreeze. Now, I find it extremely interesting how we all conceptualize that in our heads the same way, with our arms lifted and us in a crouching position, because really, when you see that, you kind of connote warrior to it, and that's the whole objective of kabuki theater. Because people can't really understand the language that is going on, the audience is extremely dependent on movements. So, great job, you guys. You can sit down. The intention behind Mi Okiru is to capture the highest moments of tension into a single physical gesture and to more or less hold everyone around them, the actors and the audience alike, in a breathless trance. After a few seconds, the actor unfreezes and the play continues. You can think of this as a sort of tableau, only for a few seconds and in the middle of the play as opposed to right before a blackout. Now, to reiterate a previous point, this type of intensified movement, even if for a few seconds, maintains the attention of the audience and recaptures the essence of the play, because with the language that is used, it can be easy to forget without exaggerated movements. Now, I would actually like to make a comparison to what we see in Western society. Now, in kabuki theater, they do use words, but if you think of the silent films that characterized the early 20th century, you notice that their facial expressions weren't always super realistic, and the movement was often either faster or slower than we would typically have it. That's to make those serve as clarifiers actually in those movies to ensure that the audience is actually getting the message. Also, this served as an inspiration for the silent scene that I'm putting into my play, and so this has really affected me both as a performer and a director. And so when we were actually blocking that, you might have noticed that the gestures and the gesticulations were a little bit exaggerated and everything kind of went at a slower pace. That is to ensure that the audience, especially people who aren't seasoned in a lot of theatrical movement or aren't as aware as the actors on stage, won't be left thinking, oh my goodness, what just happened, and why did they transition into talking again? So I found that to be an extremely interesting connection upon researching. Now, another movement aspect of kabuki theater is the archetypal journey. Now, 2 of these journeys, the roppo and the michiyuki, are extremely effective in paving the fates of the characters, as well as leaving the audience with some questions about what will happen beyond the stage. And in Eastern and Western society alike, leaving the audience more changed than they were when they came in and leaving them with questions is actually the objective that makes for a successful performance. You might think, what will happen to the characters when the stage blacks out and everyone leaves? Well, Roppo and Michiyuki not only set up these questions, but they present suggestions for the answers as well. The roppo is a form of exiting, and it combines several Mi-o-kiru poses in rapid succession as a character leaves the stage. Again, this is a practice most common in arigato theater, and roppo is a common way of warrior characters to make dramatic exits upon leaving a battle or war. Roppo is likely derived from swaggering walk, also known as tanzen roppo, of the Edo period dandies as they went between the tea houses of pleasure quarters. The literal meaning of roppo is 6 directions, and the term may have been derived from the purification ceremony of low-ranking priests when they referred to heaven and earth, as well as east, west, north, and south, thus 6. There are also several equally elaborate styles of roppo exit. The tobi roppo, which is the flying roppo, involves the actor gesturing furiously with his hand while bounding along the hamanichi, or a bridge, in the skipping motion. And so it looks a lot like this, and it goes back and forth, and it is only one hand. Note that. Now, the kitsune roppo involves the actor leaving the stage with curled up paws to resemble a fox. And as some of you guys might know, the fox is a ubiquitous symbol of slyness or deceit. Now, have you guys ever watched those cartoons where the antagonist type character will sneak around kind of like this and it'll be like that? Well, that's actually where that originates from. And you might see it a lot in anime, and so you can see that connection automatically. Roppo is is also described as this in an Aikido Journal interview with Roppo expert Seigo Okanoto Shion. Roppo can be understood in a variety of ways, such as the Roppo Roppogumi, which is 6 groups of chivalrous young men who used to wander the city streets in the Edo period. One would represent heaven, one earth, the other 4, the 4 directions that you would find on a compass. So 6 is the motif, it is the key number. Or it can be equated with the Roppo from the plays conveying the stories of priests from the Kamakura period right after Edo. So as you can see, Roppo is an all-encompassing term, and it has evolved into one of the highlights of Arigato Kabuki. Michiyuki, although much more specific and narrower in scope than Roppo, is also worth mentioning. Michiyuki means travel dances, and it shows tragic lovers journeying to their destiny. A valid Western comparison will probably be William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, who share the same tragic fate. So, say Romeo and Juliet was actually readapted into a kabuki performance on a stage, they would likely undergo Michiyuki into their tragic fates. So, overall, what has this taught me as both a performer and a director beyond using these stylistic techniques and applying them to my own writing? Well, the moral of the story is that actions can be just as or more so effective than the words in a script. Now, in Western society, a lot of the things that we write, including the play that I wrote, we try to be clever with our words. We try to use plays on words, puns, similes, metaphors. But what this has taught me is that movement can do the exact same thing. Western society is very overly intellectualized, and it has been for a long time, specifically post-World War II, when we saw a transition from silent films into the type of films that we see today. A perfect example of this would be the play Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf by Edward Albee. Now, this play, in case you guys don't know about it, it's about a series of mind games that are played, and they use each other as sounding boards. And if you look at the stage directions, it actually has a lot to do with what they say as opposed to what they do, which I think is rather unconventional. But when you think about the context of the period in which this was written, it was written circa 1962. This was during the Cold War, where there were lots of verbal threats going on around the world, but there wasn't a lot of action taken. And so if you take that and apply it to the rest of Western society, we abide a lot by the words that we say, but it's very rare that we strictly take action on them. But while Western society is a very passive society in that sense, Eastern cultures, as portrayed through their theater, specifically kabuki theater, is very active in that. Even on things that we may not believe even require action, but it does maintain the audience's attention. And so my objective in the future is to investigate other Eastern cultures and how they might integrate action more so than words. Thank you.